Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to part 3 of our final series of videos focusing on viewer-suggested cases. If you haven't seen parts 1 and 2, be sure to check those out first. We'll be sure to leave a link in the description below. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this. It really helps us to continue building the channel. With that out of the way, here is part 3 of another 3 interesting viewer-suggested cases. On January 14th, 2015, 28-year-old Nera Peich and his 2 best friends set off for the trip of a lifetime. Nera had always wanted to travel through Southeast Asia, to see the world and connect with his family's roots. The friends had told themselves that there was never going to be a better time than now. Their 30s were rapidly approaching, and they wanted to go on an adventure before the responsibilities of marriage and children got in the way. After flying out of Toronto, Nera and his friends arrived at their first stop on the trip, Bangkok, Thailand. Sleep-deprived and running on pure adrenaline, they hit the streets and began to take in the sights. The next few days passed in a similar whirlwind of adventure. They arrived at the Cambodian border on the 15th, where they stayed in the city of Siem Reap before heading to Angkor Wat. They then spent another 5 days touring around other parts of Cambodia. So far, the trip had more than lived up to expectations. Nera, in particular, seemed to be in his element. He spoke Cambodian and was enjoying connecting with the locals. Still, after days of non-stop travel, the rapid pace of the trip, combined with little sleep and plenty of alcohol, were starting to take their toll on the group. In a later interview, Nera's friend Elliot Ram would say that the 3 of them were starting to argue, and that Nera said that he was no longer interested in doing any of the things that they had previously planned. However, Elliot chalked up this sudden change of attitude to a lack of sleep. The 3 of them just needed a good night's rest. But the next morning, things took an alarming turn. Just 10 minutes after boarding a 6 a.m. bus in Phnom Penh that was supposed to take them into Vietnam, Nera told his friends that they had to get off. He said that officials and employees on the bus were acting strangely, and he got into an argument with them after they reportedly asked for their passports and then claimed that they needed to hold on to them. Based on what they were saying, Nera also believed that the people were planning to rob them. Because he was the only one in the group that spoke Cambodian, and the friends had no reason not to trust him, they quickly got off the bus, and instead headed back into town. However, after arriving at the hotel where they had stayed the previous night, Nera no longer wanted to go to Vietnam at all. Instead, the friends booked plane tickets to Laos and flew there that night. Even after this change of plans, though, it was clear that Nera was still bothered by the incident that had occurred earlier that day. In messages he sent to his fiancée, he said that he was worried and that he thought he overheard people at the airport paging his name in a threatening manner. By the time the group arrived in Laos's Watay International Airport, Nera was done with the trip altogether. He told his friends that he wanted to fly back to Canada, and insisted that they come with him. The abrupt decision caused a fight between the friends, as they tried to convince Nera to come with them to a hotel, but Nera insisted on going home. According to Elliot, Nera kept saying that he believed something bad was going to happen to them, and that they were being watched. However, they were unable to get him to explain where the supposed danger was coming from, and said that it felt like they were being watched because they were having a loud argument in the middle of the airport. After more than an hour of arguing back and forth, unable to change Nera's mind, the friends decided that they had to let him go. His flight was just about to take off, so they walked him as far as they could to the security gate, and he left. Just a few hours later, Nera was dead. From here, we have only murky details pieced together over months by multiple sources. What everyone seems to agree on is that Nera died between 2 and 3 a.m. while still inside the Watay International Airport. But the circumstances of his death are mysterious and remain hotly debated. Laotian officials say that at some point that morning, Nera became agitated and began destroying vending machines and breaking shop windows within the airport. He was found dead in one of the airport's restaurants, and the scene was covered in blood. According to them, his death was a suicide. He cut himself in the neck, chest, and arms, and these injuries had led to his death. The Peitsch family, meanwhile, completely rejected this version of events, believing that the story that they had been told did not add up. For starters, they said that Nera was not suicidal and had no previous history of mental illness. 4 knives were also found at the scene where he died, leading Nera's family to believe that he was murdered. Things only got stranger when Nera's parents discovered several voicemails that he had left them shortly before his death. The voicemails are difficult to listen to, and show that Nera was obviously in a high state of distress in the hours before his death. In them, he makes several claims, all related to him being in danger. He says that he needs help, and that his parents need to contact the embassy. He also says that his passport has been taken away, and he believes that people are trying to lure him out of the airport so they can kill him. He claims that drivers, security guards, and a number of other people are in on the plot. He also alludes to saying something bad about the Cambodian Prime Minister, and that it might have gotten him in trouble. In the following days and weeks, the Peitsch family began their own slow search for answers. This was made difficult by the fact that Canada had no embassy in Laos at the time, so information was initially presented second-hand by officials from Australia, before consular officials from the Canadian embassy in Thailand could arrive. In February, the Peitsch family had an autopsy performed on Nera's body in Thailand, partly because they did not trust the information they received from officials in Laos. The autopsy showed that Nera had indeed suffered critical injuries to his neck and chest, but that the numerous wounds to his hands and arms appeared to be defensive in nature. This reaffirmed the family's belief that something sinister had happened to Nera, but it would be the last piece of concrete information they would be able to obtain for a while. For the next several months, Nera's sister Serena was forced to engage in a frustrating game of legal and political telephone, and was constantly stonewalled by authorities in Laos and Thailand, as well as agencies within Canada. In August of 2015, Serena was finally able to get in contact with Australian consular officials in Laos, who told her that surveillance video from the airport on the night of her brother's death did exist, but that Laotian officials were refusing to share it with anyone. According to the Australian officials, from the little footage they had been allowed to view, they had seen that Nera was in a highly agitated state before he died. However, they admitted that they simply did not know what had happened at the end, and that full access to the footage had been blocked. In September, again after months of unanswered questions and repeated follow-ups with officials in several countries, Serena was finally able to obtain her brother's toxicology report, autopsy photos, and some photos of the crime scene. These were later examined by forensic pathologist Dr. John Butt and blood spatter expert Joe Slemko. Both concluded that all of the evidence they had seen pointed to a homicide rather than a suicide. For starters, there were no drugs or alcohol in Nera's system at the time of his death. Secondly, the amount of blood at the scene and the way it had been found around the room were not consistent with someone who had committed suicide. The forensic pathologist also said that the wounds to Nera's neck and chest were deep and forceful, and were unlike any that he had ever seen in an actual suicide case. He also believed the wounds were not self-inflicted. Sadly, despite the overwhelming amount of suspicious evidence in Nera's case, it seems unlikely that justice will be done unless the surveillance video from the night of his death somehow sees the light of day. Since the last major update we could find in this case dated back to October of 2015, it seems that officials in Laos are determined to hold on to the footage, depriving Nera's family of any real closure about his death. That brings us to the end of our list. As always, if you enjoyed our video, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this, making sure to hit the notification bell to stay up to date with our latest releases. Thank you for watching.